And yet these men of the Southwest had an idea of their own, as vivid and as binding as the state idea of the men of the Eastern Coast. Though half their leaders were born in the North, the people themselves were overwhelmingly Southern. From all the older states, all around the huge crescent, which swung around from Kentucky, coastwise to Florida, immigration in the 20s and 30s had poured into Mississippi. Consequently, the new community presented a composite picture of the whole South, and like all composite pictures, it emphasized only the factors common to all its parts. What all the South had in common, what made a man a Southerner in the general sense, in distinction from a Northerner on one hand, or a Virginian, Carolinian, Georgian on the other, could have been observed with clearness in Mississippi just before the war as nowhere else. Therefore, the fulfillment of the idea of Southern life in general terms was the vision of things hoped for by the new men of the Southwest. The features of that vision were common to them all: country life, broad acres, generous hospitality, an aristocratic system. The temperaments of these men were sufficiently buoyant to enable them to apprehend this idea even before it had materialized. Their romantic minds could see the gold at the end of the rainbow. Theirs was not the pride of administering a well-ordered, inherited system, but the joy of building a new system, in their minds wholly elastic, to be sure, but still inspired by that old system. What may be called the sense of Southern nationality, as opposed to the sense of states' rights, strictly speaking, distinguished this brilliant young community of the Southwest. In that community, Davis spent the years that appear to have been the most impressionable of his life, belonging to a new family just emerging into wealth. He began life as a West Pointer and saw gallant service as a youth on the frontier. Resigned from the army to pursue a romantic attachment, came home to lead the life of a wealthy planter, and receive the impress of Mississippi, made his entry into politics, still a soldier at heart, with the philosophy of state rights on his lips, but in his heart that sense of the Southern people as a new nation, which needed only the occasion to make it the relentless enemy of the rights of the individual Southern states. Add together the instinctive military point of view and this Southern nationalism that even in 1861 had scarcely revealed itself. Join with these a fearless and haughty spirit, proud to the verge of arrogance, but perfectly devoted, perfectly sincere, and you have the main lines of the political character of Davis when he became president. It may be that as he went forward in his great undertaking, as antagonism developed, as Rhett and others turned against him, Davis hardened. He lost whatever comprehension he once had of the Rhett type. Seeking to weld into one irresistible unit all the military powers of the South, he became at last, in the eyes of his opponents, a monster, while to him, more and more positively, the others became more dreamers. It took about a year for this impressionable conflict within the Confederacy to reveal itself. During the 12 months following Davis's election as provincial president, he dominated the situation. Though the Charleston Mercury, the Rhett Oregon, found opportunities to be sharply critical of the president. He assembled armies. He initiated heroic efforts to make up for the handicap of the South in the manufacture of munitions, and succeeded in starting a number of munitions plants. Though powerless to prevent the establishment of the blockade, he was able during that first year to keep in touch with Europe, to start out Confederate privateers upon the high sea, and to import a considerable quantity of arms and supplies. At the close of the year, the Confederate armies were approaching general efficiency for all their enormous handicaps, almost if not quite as rapidly as were the Union armies. And the one great event of the year on land, the first battle of Manassas or Bull Run, was a signal Confederate victory. To be sure, Davis was severely criticized in some quarters for not adopting an aggressive policy. The Confederate government, whether wisely or foolishly, had not taken the people into its confidence, and the lack of munitions was not generally appreciated. The easy popular cries were all sounded. "We are standing still. The country is being invaded. The president is a do-nothing." From the coast regions especially, where the blockade was felt in all severity, the outcry was loud. Nevertheless, the South in the main was content with the administration during most of the first year. In November, when the general elections were held, Davis was chosen without opposition as the first regular Confederate president for 6 years, and Stevens became the vice president. The election was followed by an important change in the Southern cabinet. Benjamin became Secretary of War, in succession to the first War Secretary, Leroy P. Walker. Toombs had already left the Confederate cabinet, complaining that Davis degraded him to the level of a mere clerk. He had withdrawn the previous July. His successor in the State Department was R.M.T. Hunter of Virginia, who remained in office until February 1862, when his removal to the Confederate Senate opened the way for a further advancement of Benjamin. Richmond, which had been designated as the capital soon after the secession of Virginia, was the scene of the inauguration on February 22, 1862. Although the weather proved bleak and rainy, an immense crowd gathered around the Washington Monument, the Capitol Square, to listen to the inaugural address. By this time, the confidence in the government, which was felt generally at the time of the election, had suffered a shock. Foreign affairs were not progressing satisfactorily. Though England had accorded to the Confederacy the status of a belligerent, this was poor consolation for her refusal to make a full recognition of the new government as an independent power. Dread of internal distress was increasing. Gold commanded a premium of 50%. Disorder was a feature of the life in the cities. It was known that several recent military events had been victories for the Federals. There was a rumor that some great disaster had taken place in Tennessee. The crowd listened anxiously to hear the rumor denied by the president, but it was not denied. The tense listeners noted 2 sentences which formed an admission that the situation was grave. 1 million men, it is estimated, are now standing in hostile array and waging war along a frontier of 1,000 miles. Battles have been fought, sieges have been conducted, and although the contest is not ended and the tide of the moment is against us, the final result in our favor is not doubtful.